Perversion, taking something cool, something innocent, and something fun, and twisting it into the complete opposite. It can be applied to anything. Happens to little birdies that toddy to a putty cat, turning into one that eats putty tats. Happens to heroes, the chosen one meant to bring balance to the force, to the one who almost extinguishes it. And even noble concepts aren't immune. Law, order, justice. Take these concepts and twist them just enough so that instead of protecting the innocent from monsters, it makes monsters instead. Growing up, when it came to Transformers, the basic premise of their war was simple. Two factions, one good, one evil, duking it out on an energy-drained planet, eventually leaving it behind to find new fuel for their fight. And that was good enough for the kiddies. But as adults, we wanted more, and that's exactly what the writers over at IDW set out to provide. Because unlike our childhood adventures, the real world isn't black or white. There's a whole lot of gray in between. And they decided that their Transformers universe needed that too. So as the story goes, millions of years ago, Cybertronian society had a problem. The same problem that's plagued civilizations since the dawn of time. Those in power grew corrupt with that power, and the citizens they were supposed to protect and serve got abused, exploited, and cast aside instead. And it was from this oppressed underclass that a single Cybertronian rose up. A fighter, a rebel, a voice for the voiceless, and started a movement to fight back against the injustice that he saw all around him. And his name was Megatron. And here's where IDW does something clever with the material, because in this version of events, Megatron isn't just a gifted fighter, he's a gifted writer, a philosopher. This dude didn't just lead an uprising, he wrote it into existence, penning manifestos and philosophical treatises that laid out exactly what the Decepticons stood for, why the revolution was justified, and what a liberated Cybertron was supposed to look like. Power to the people, smash the ruling class, and all that. Basically, Karl Marx with a fusion cannon. But here's the thing about establishing a new way of life, or as some may view it, essentially a religion. Not everyone follows it the same way. Some Decepticons are casual believers, like in a buffet, picking and choosing whichever parts of the ideology are convenient on any given day. And then there are the zealots, the ones who don't just follow the doctrine, they follow it to the letter. No exceptions, no nuance. The ones who see themselves as living the true, uncorrupted version of the cause. And look at everyone else who doesn't share that same level of commitment, including those on their own side, with something close to disgust. Anyone who doesn't measure up isn't just wrong in their eyes, they're a stain on the movement. And stains need to be washed out, removed, exterminated, executed. And that's where the Decepticon Justice Division, or DJD, comes in. So, what exactly is the Decepticon Justice Division? In universe, they are Megatron's internal enforcement squad, Cybertron's answer to the secret police, or a religious inquisition, if that inquisition also carried themselves like a heavy metal band on tour. Their job isn't fighting Autobots, it's fighting their own side. Hunt down, torture, and execute any Decepticon who deserts, fails, or so much as strays from ideological purity, making an example so brutal that word of it alone keeps the rest of the army in line. They operate out of a heavily armed warship with a name reflective of their devotion to Megatron, the Peaceful Tyranny. And by the time most Decepticons even hear the DJD is coming for them, it's already too late. And many would rather take matters into their own hands, if you get my drift, than wait for the DJD to do it for them. The DJD's base of operations sits on the planet Mesatine, a frozen mining world rich with a mutated supercharged strain of energy substance called Nucleon. The DJD found it, claimed it, and rebranded it as Nuke. Their Nuke, using it to supercharge themselves well past normal Cybertronian limits. which means on top of everything else, you've got an overpowered torture squad running on an unstable, addictive super fuel, because apparently, regular DJD wasn't scary enough. But what really sells the horror of this group isn't the violence, it's the commitment. Every single member has given up something to be there. And I don't mean loyalty or time or limbs in battle. I mean identity itself. When a Decepticon joins the DJD, they surrender their name. Active members take on the names of the first 5 Cybertronian city-states that fell to Megatron in the earliest days of the war. Tarn, Helex, Kaon, Tesarus, Voss. Not medals of honor, erasures. And when a member eventually dies, somebody else just becomes them. So as far as the rest of the army is concerned, the DJD isn't 5 guys. It's an eternal, undefeatable concept, wearing 5 different faces. And their leader takes that erasure even further. Tarn doesn't just have a code name. He doesn't even show you his own face anymore. What you see instead is the Decepticon insignia itself, worn like a mask, concealing whatever's underneath. The ultimate true believer doesn't just serve the cause, he becomes its living symbol. Now, I think that the real-world origin story here is just as interesting as the fiction. These guys weren't born in the original cartoon, or a Hasbro brainstorm session about what new toy to sell you next. The DJD were born in the comics, specifically 2012 in IDW Publishing's More Than Meets the Eye, courtesy of writer James Roberts and artist Alex Milne. And what's clear from how the DJD actually plays out on the page is that Roberts wasn't interested in another big bad shows up, good guys take him down, the end arc. He wanted to explore something nasty, something more grounded. What does internal discipline actually look like in an army that's been fighting the same war for 4 million years? And what happens when the cause itself starts to matter more than the people dying for it? So now that we've got the Decepticon Justice Division as a unit hammered down, let's get into the actual members of the team. Quick housekeeping though before we dive in. Tarn is getting his own standalone episode down the line, because frankly the guy has enough psychological wreckage to fill one of his own. So consider this part 1. We'll touch on Tarn where the story requires it, but today belongs to the rest of the team. And here's how I like to think about how this team operates when they have a target in their sights. Let's break it down. Voss, the opening move. Real name, 4-stock. His alt mode is a sniper rifle, one that's mass shiftable enough to be wielded by his teammates or even Megatron himself. He's the one who finds you first, from somewhere you'll never see, and either ends the chase right there or makes sure you're not running anywhere afterwards. Culturally, he's a linguistic purist who refuses to speak modern Cybertronian, communicating only in an ancient dialect Tarn has to translate, which somehow makes being tortured by him even more unsettling since you can't even understand the guy doing it. His personal method, once you're actually in custody, involves a detachable faceplate lined with hooks, drills, and spikes that he forces directly into your head. Iron Maiden, but intimate and in your face, literally. Kaon, the interrogation, real name, Amp, communications officer and keeper of The List, the DJD's constantly updated hit list, maintained with the energy of a middle manager doing performance reviews, because to them, that's basically what this is. His alt mode is, by James Roberts' explicit demand, a fully functional electric chair. In robot form, he's completely eyeless and perceives the world through echolocation. Strap you in, run thousands of volts through you, and that's it. But despite this rather electrifying method of torture, perhaps the most shocking thing about Kaon is that he's the most emotionally intact member of the entire division, continually doting on the team's pet. So yeah, buried under all that voltage is an actual soft side that ultimately doesn't do him any favors. More on that later. Helex and Tesarus, cleanup, both heavy muscle, both built around chest cavity execution devices. Both destroy whatever's left of you once Kaon's done getting what he needs. But the attitude difference between them? is the whole point. Helex, real name Crucible, is built on obscure deep-cut lore, the old Marvel Comics Decepticon harvesters, brutish machines that hunted down neutrals and threw them into smelting pools to fuel the war machine. But Helex isn't just the machine that drags you there. He is the smelting pool, with a fully functioning high-temperature furnace built right into his chest cavity. And he treats every execution like entertainment. He's even got his own signature move, ripping out your brain module and shoving it into your own mouth as you die. Consistent enough that Megatron identifies a DJD massacre by that detail alone. Tesarus, real name Scissor Saw, is the other heavy hitter, and his gimmick is an industrial shredder instead of a furnace. Hoist you up and lower you feet first into a rotating chamber lined with diamond-tipped blades in the center of his torso. But where Helex is having the time of his life, Tesarus is bored, consistently written as apathetic about the whole thing. And that's arguably even more disturbing than Helix's sadism, because it means the horror isn't a crusade to him anymore. It's Tuesday. It's paperwork. Tarn, the finish. As I mentioned earlier, I'm saving the DJD leader's story for later, but I'll say this much. Tarn is personal. When Tarn decides that it's your time to die, it's not the assembly line anymore, it's him. And unlike the rest of his team, Tarn doesn't need hooks, blades, or a furnace to do it. All he needs is his voice. That's it. Pansit. That's the tease for part 2. But we're not quite done yet, because apparently every decent team needs a mascot. Meet the Pet, a feral 4-legged Cybertronian beast that the DJD keeps on a literal leash, mostly under Kaon's care, used for tracking and the occasional bit of Decepticon propaganda about a tamed Spark Eater. Except the Pet isn't an animal. The Pet used to be a Cybertronian, specifically Dominus Ambus, a respected Autobot philosopher and activist, spark brother to Minimus Ambus, who, spoiler, is the little dude inside IDW's take on Ultramagnus. Long before he was anyone's pet, Dominus was Agent 113, a deep-cover Autobot mole who'd infiltrated the DJD itself under the identity of Voss, feeding intelligence back to Autobot Command. Since any normal transmission would have been caught instantly by Kaon's senses, Agent 113 came up with one of the cleverest bits of spycraft in the franchise, firing data-encoded bullets directly into the badges of Autobot soldiers mid-combat, later dug out by field medics and decoded safely behind the lines. For years, he fed the Autobots intel on exactly which Decepticon traitors the DJD were hunting, intel the Autobots could use to protect defectors in exchange for information. Eventually, the DJD figured out who Voss really was and decided that death would have been a mercy, so instead, they did something they called domestication, a lobotomy, a full-body reconfiguration that stripped away Agent 113's intellect, his voice, his humanoid shape, and left him a feral quadruped. Kaon named him the Pet, and in a genuinely twisted bit of Lima syndrome actually grew attached to him. The DJD then used his new senses to hunt down Dominus's own former allies. A brilliant philosopher turned into a bloodhound for the people who broke him. Oh well, at least he's got a torturous individual who transforms into an electric chair to take care of him. Yippee! And finally, the most unusual member of the group. Just one look and it's pretty obvious that on the surface, Nickel doesn't belong here. And that's the point. A mini-con, tiny, next to the walking execution devices she works alongside. She's the DJD's chief medical officer. No gimmick, no internal chest death contraption, nothing. Nickel never personally executes anyone, but she's completely complicit anyway. Her home colony, Prion, was wiped out by an organic supremacist coalition called the Black Bloc Consortia. The DJD found her in the wreckage and recruited her. She joined not because she believed in Megatron's original ideals of equality, but because the Decepticons were the faction most willing to give her vengeance against organics. Period. But hatred for organics is one thing. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to conclude that the optics of having a cutesy-wootsy looking team member doesn't exactly help promote the terrifying image that the DJD was going for. But practicality-wise, Nickel is essential. The rest of the DJD have bodies built around brutal transformation gimmicks that constantly need patching, especially Tarn. And that's not even accounting for the occupational hazards of the profession. These guys are extremely vicious, but they're not invulnerable. Injuries are just part of the job. She's part maternal caretaker and part deeply cynical enabler, and I'd imagine with a dash of Mama Fratelli thrown in, keeping her monsters running while not looking too hard at what they do for a living. Giving all the effort that went into shaping exactly who the Decepticon Justice Division was, it's clear James Roberts wanted them to stick around. And stick around they did, not just as a background threat, but a real one, constantly looming, making their presence felt in deadly ways, right up until the very end, where ironically, they set off to take down Megatron himself. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there, so we'll get to that a lot later on. The DJD spent the Great War serving as Megatron's off-the-books enforcement arm, and over IDW's sprawling 13-year run, they racked up quite the resume and quite the body count. After numerous mentions of their names, here, there, everywhere, the Decepticon Justice Division officially debuted in person in the pages of issue number 7 of the series More Than Meets the Eye, and James Roberts made sure it was an impressive one, hunting and taking down their latest target on the list, the Decepticon Phase Sixer, Black Shadow. Now, for those not in the know in the IDW universe, a Phase Sixer was basically an ultra-powerful, near-invulnerable warrior engineered by Megatron to single-handedly eradicate and harvest dying planets. So yeah, not your typical rank-and-file grunt. Black Shadow's resume speaks for itself. 3 wreckers killed and their leader Hyperion dismembered, a massacre of over 3,000 Autobots in the 113th Battalion, a fight where he personally went toe-to-toe with both Optimus Prime and Ultra Magnus, and won, 3 billion dead on Rigel 4. So yeah, by any measure, one of the most dangerous Decepticons ever. And he was also a traitor. Black Shadow took a bribe from the Autobots to blow up a fleet of Decepticon warworlds, and that act of betrayal put him on the list. When the DJD finally caught up with him, they didn't just win, they dismantled him piece by piece. Electrocuted by Kaon, melted by Helex, shredded by Tesarus, and finally taken out by Tarn himself. In their very first appearance, the DJD had already answered the only question that mattered. Is anyone actually safe from these 5? Well, not even a Phase Sixer. And speaking of questions, I've got a question for you. Are you into magic swords, bulging muscles, and whatever this thing is supposed to be? Well, if you are, why not check out my second channel where I still tell stories, but this time from Grayskull. So yeah, if mastering the universe is your thing, go check out Stories from Grayskull and show it some love with a like, comment, share, and a sub to the channel. Any way you choose to help will be greatly appreciated, so thank you. Anyway, just so you don't get the wrong idea, it wasn't just the heavy hitters who ended up on the list. Even lowly K-Class was fair game. Quick context, K-Class Decepticons, or K-Cons, were exactly what they sounded like. Soldiers re-engineered into living kamikaze weapons, forcefully transforming into bombs right before impact. Some volunteered out of pure fanaticism, and others got, well, voluntold, specifically prisoners being punished for their crimes, given a choice between dying as a coward or dying as a weapon. Fulcrum was one such K-Con, who on his one and only mission was ironically saved by his own cowardice. He froze up so badly that his forced transformation into a bomb never triggered, and he just hit the ground as a regular robot instead of detonating. Everyone assumed he was dead. He wasn't. He remained comatose until shortly after the Great War, when a ragtag crew of Decepticon leftovers calling themselves the Scavengers stumbled across him and added him to their ranks. And that's when the DJD showed up. Not because Fulcrum betrayed anyone, not because he defected. He was on the list simply for surviving a mission he was supposed to die on. And as far as the DJD was concerned, that made him a failure to fulfill his purpose as a Decepticon, which by their logic is just as good as treason. Tarn gave the scavengers 15 minutes to hand Fulcrum over, and quite unwisely, they chose to fight instead, and paid for it. Tesarus ground up one of them, Flywheels, in his chest compartment. Voss forced his spike faceplate into another, Croc. The only reason any of these scavengers survived is that Kaon detected a bigger threat nearby, and Tarn decided that the scavengers weren't worth the DJD's time anymore. He left them with one parting gift: their names, now permanently on the list. A list that also included A-list Decepticons: Shockwave and, surprise surprise, Starscream, who actually managed to get himself removed from it. How? Never explained, but come on, we're talking about Starscream, the con who could weasel his way out of anything. Shockwave, though? Not so lucky. Logically, he tried to broker a deal with Tarn, offering up his crew of imprisoned Decepticons in exchange for his own life. But the zealous Tarn had no intentions of letting any of them live, and basically came this close to ending the one-eyed Decepticon literally over the comm lines with his special ability. Fortunately, Shockwave was saved by reinforcements arriving, led by Bludgeon and the Combiner Monstructor. The DJD smartly retreated to hunt another day. That being said, one of the greatest atrocities the DJD were ever connected to didn't actually involve the list at all. And that was the deal struck between them and the Autobot Chief Medical Officer, Pharma, head of the Delphi Medical Facility on the planet Mesatine. You know, where the DJD live. So rather than get wiped out by their neighbors, Pharma made Tarn an offer: leave Delphi alone, and Pharma would keep Tarn supplied with fresh transformation cogs harvested from Delphi's dead, feeding Tarn's growing, crippling addiction to changing shape. It worked for a while, then the DJD's quota kept climbing, and Pharma got desperate enough to secretly engineer a deadly rust plague, killing almost every patient under his watch, just to keep up with the DJD's demands. And speaking of Autobots, while their prime directive was hunting down Decepticon traitors, the DJD were still Decepticons themselves, so killing Autobots was always on the table. Tipped off by a Decepticon mole, the DJD caught up with the Autobot ship Lost Light. Tarn initially agreed to spare the crew in exchange for them handing over Overlord, another rogue Phase Sixer being held prisoner on board. Sounded simple enough, right? Until Tarn found out another known Decepticon defector, Drift, was part of that Autobot crew. And so the deal was off. The Autobot crew was killed. All of them. Okay, most of them, with the only survivor being the Archivist Rewind, who was forced at gunpoint to record the entire massacre in exchange for the life of his partner, Chrome Dome. And then they killed Chrome Dome anyway, stabbing him to death with his own Nemo surgery needles jammed into his face. Eesh. And when all of that was done, then they sawed off Overlord's head, so mission accomplished. But don't worry, kiddies. Turns out this Lost Light was a quantum duplicate, a second alternate copy of the ship created by a freak malfunction with its own engines. The real crew was alive and well, completely unaware any of this had even happened. But regardless, a kill is a kill, and the DJD killed a whole lot of Autobots without breaking a cyber sweat, duplicates or not. Oh, and somewhere in all this death and destruction, the DJD also killed the Autobot Trailbreaker, ripped him apart limb from limb, and as a parting gift, smashed his extracted brain module against his very own force field. Talk about harsh. Just a random poor Autobot in the wrong place at the wrong time, offering aid to a wounded enemy and getting butchered for his trouble. Except, it wasn't quite so random in the end, because that same force field generator extracted from Trailbreaker's body, it would go on to play a starring role in the DJD's own destruction. See, nothing lasts forever, and despite all their collective power and ruthlessness, the DJD weren't immortal, and they sure as hell weren't destined to stand triumphant when all was said and done in IDW's story. For a team whose entire mission revolved around violence and death, I guess you could say it was pretty inevitable that death would eventually come for them too. And it started to crack from the inside first. During a situation wherein the pet was captured, Kaon did something no DJD member is supposed to do. He felt something. He begged Tarn to divert the mission and rescue the pet instead. To Tarn, that wasn't loyalty. That was the one sin the ideology could never forgive. Sentiment. So Tarn reached into his own communications officer, ripped out his head and spinal column on the spot, and made the point stick. Not even the executioners are exempt from the standard they enforce. Then came the real earthquake. Megatron, their god, their reason for existing, the leader whose ideals they'd spent millions of years enforcing, publicly renounced the Decepticon cause entirely and defected to the Autobots. To the rest of the galaxy, that looked like redemption. To Tarn, it looked like the ultimate betrayal. If Megatron wouldn't uphold the cause anymore, then Megatron himself belonged on the list. And rather than follow their leader into peace, Tarn allied the DJD with the rogue warlord Tesarus and set out to hunt down and execute Megatron personally. They tracked him down to the cemetery planet of Necroworld, the place where Megatron, one of his oldest allies in Ravage, and his skeleton crew of Autobots would make their last stand against all odds. The battle turned bloody fast. Tarn tore Ravage apart, and the Autobots were easily overwhelmed. But just when the bad guys had Megatron at their mercy, the ex-Decepticon did something that you could say was second nature. He deceived them. Stopped the DJD cold. He activated a force field around himself, generated by the very same device once owned by Trailbreaker. To Tarn, it looked exactly like what it had looked like every time before. A coward hiding. But it wasn't. The force field wasn't a hiding place. It was a containment chamber. A trap. Megatron had spent his entire time mastering something no one saw coming. The ability to channel raw antimatter. And once the DJD forced themselves through the field, thinking they'd finally cornered their prey, Megatron dropped the act completely. He cursed them for robbing him of the one chance he'd had at genuine redemption. And then he killed them, one by one. And in his final act of contempt, he made sure they didn't die as the legends they'd spent their whole existence becoming. He stripped their titles away and named them by the identities they'd surrendered to earn those titles in the first place. Forestalk, Scissor Saw, Crucible. Tarn went last, and true to form, he didn't go quietly. He went trying to talk his way out of it. Bargaining, threats, that trademark theatrical bravado, none of it worked. In the end, his mask was ripped off. But let's not go into revealing Tarn's actual identity just yet. I'm saving that, again, for part 2. Because what's a good story without a little cliffhanger? In the end, only Nickel made it out. Partway through the siege, something in her cracked. She realized, maybe for the first time, that Tarn didn't actually care about the Decepticon cause anymore. He just wanted Megatron dead. So she made the call. Nickel walked away from the DJD for good that day, eventually finding her way and joining the ranks of the very misfits her old team once terrorized, the Scavengers. And with that, the immortal, undefeatable concept turned out to be exactly as mortal as everyone else. But here's the thing about legends. They tend to live on well past the actual lives of the individuals who started them. So while the DJD story ended in that issue, they went on to become fan favorites moving forward. Because while you could easily write them off as just another badass Decepticon death squad, there's something in their, pardon the pun, execution of concept that made them so much more than one-and-done comic characters. And I think it all boils down to 3 uncomfortable ideas James Roberts wove into every one of these characters. First, the bureaucratization of atrocity. As weird as this may sound, even though they're essentially monsters, the DJD didn't carry themselves like monsters. They operated with a twisted sense of class and refinement, to the point that Tarn plays classical music during executions, calling each one an appointment. But that refinement isn't genuine passion, it's protocol. Kaon updates the list with the same detached energy as someone doing quarterly reviews, and none of it is there because they love culture. It's there because proper procedure says an execution should look a certain way. They've dressed up unthinkable cruelty in the sterile, elegant language of institutional tradition, which, if that sounds familiar, is basically the textbook definition of the banality of evil. These aren't just a bunch of villains cackling maniacally in a lair. They're an old, established firm that's been doing this so long, even the horror has a house style. And to me, that's so much scarier. Second, trauma as the birthplace of radicalization. As far as we know, most of these guys didn't start off as monsters. They were turned into them. Their leader Tarn was a victim of state-sanctioned mutilation in a previous life, long before Megatron got his hooks on him. Nickel watched her entire home colony get wiped off the map. Even that not entirely evil core shows up in Kaon, a torturer whose entire body is built to be an execution device, who still found room somewhere in there to genuinely care for the team's pet. James Roberts is very deliberately making the point that the horrors of this war are cyclical. Yesterday's abused victims become tomorrow's executioners, and the machine just keeps feeding itself. And third, and maybe the most chilling, the total eradication of the self. Every active member gives up their name and previous identity. They become interchangeable, replaceable, cogs, not individuals. And that theme reaches its absolute peak with Agent 113. The DJD didn't just kill Dominus Ambus, they erased his mind, his voice, his very shape, and left behind an animal. It's not a death, it's an annihilation of the concept of a person. And that, more than any melting chest cavity or electric chair, might be the single most disturbing idea this team represents. And it's exactly that depth that lets the DJD keep going after the comic page. They showed up across other corners of the franchise: animation, video games, and eventually full circle back into actual toys. A trajectory that's a rarity for Transformers, because the DJD is one of the few cases in the franchise where the story came first and the toys came eventually. Because while you'd think a cast of characters this popular would be automatically fast-tracked for plastic immortalization by Hasbro, there was one glaring problem. How exactly do you turn a rolling incinerator, an electric chair, heck, a sniper rifle, into a toy that would conceivably be sitting on a store shelf for kids to buy? That's one PR nightmare Hasbro definitely didn't want. That said, the lure of money was just too much to resist, so in 2023, DJD leader Tarn got his first official toy as part of the Legacy line. And it was a great toy, one that thankfully transformed into a Cybertronian tank, so it was all good. But aside from a familiar-looking sniper rifle packed into another character, Javelin from another Legacy Deadeye Duel 2-pack that kinda, sorta resembled a certain archaic speaking Iron Maiden mask-wielding DJD member's alt mode, if you painted it purple, that was pretty much all Hasbro could give us. So if you wanted the rest of the team in plastic form, you would have to go through the other unofficial channel, the answer to every fandom's wishlist item Hasbro just couldn't get to: third party. And boy, did they run with it. Mastermind Creations, under their reformatted line, took on the ambitious job of bringing the whole team to life, sidestepping copyright by simply branding their crew as the D Squad, throwing their own naming layer over a group already living under manufactured identities. Kultur, Cynicus, Anarchus, Moors, Tortor, all recreated as fully transformable, comic-accurate toys that would fit right into either a masterpiece or chug collection. They even produced Nickel and the Pet, rebranded as Knee and Foxwire. And then there's Iron Factory, which took a completely different approach with their pocket-sized Decepticon Enforcement Corps, or Spirits of the DEC line. 5 Legends-scaled figures that, in an impressive non-canonical flex, combined into a full-on super robot. I guess you could call him a Mega Tarn. Definitely not asked for, but I'm sure greatly appreciated by the fandom. And speaking of great appreciation, going off topic, I'm sure we can all agree that these people deserve every drop of appreciation, recognition, and love thrown their way, even if it's in the form of a team of transforming robots. If you want to know more about the Autobot team of first responders, the Protectobots, I've got their story here. And if you want part 2 of the DJD story, that'll be up here next week. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope to hear from you in the comments below. Go ahead and tell me your story.